All right, we are ready to begin. It is 5:37 PM on July 11th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. I get a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
And is there a second?
I was thinking.
All right, motion is made, seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion is approved. First item on our agenda is discussion of progress and challenges. And James is gonna lead this discussion.
Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. And I want to talk about accomplishments
Make sure.
and progress we've made since I came on board in January. So this would be like a 2-month update or the progress that we see that we've made beginning in January. So one of the biggest accomplishments that the Lawrence Community Shelter has accomplished was opening the village. When I started in January, the village was already built, constructed, and waiting to be occupied. And so I don't know when we actually got the go ahead to start staffing that, but it wasn't immediately. So I think we did that maybe starting in February. I was given the okay to go ahead and start to open. And I know there was a lot of angst about when is the village gonna be open, when is the village gonna be open? And we actually opened on March the 18th. I think during the month of March, we must have hired over 20 staff. And so that was a great accomplishment to hire that many new people for a new site. And so working with all the staff to say this is not the city, the village is not the city, it's Lawrence Community Shelter. We're managing the village. And so that was a great accomplishment. And from now where we're at now, it's almost like we've been doing it all along. So we see a lot of turnover in the village, but we have a waiting list, so it's not hard to interview people and get them in the village. So the hiring of the village was one of the biggest accomplishments that we took this year. One of the other things that accomplishment was hiring key staff and director roles. One was director of finance, which she actually is she didn't come on full-time, she's part-time. And maybe half-time without benefits, but it equals out to what a full-time salary would be. And she was instrumental in helping us through union negotiations and crunching spreadsheets, and I mean, it was very good. Deputy Director Kim Bravitz, she's come on board and she's charged with handling all the programming and managing our frontline staff, which are case managers and DSAs. She's done a phenomenal job. I talked to her today. It would have been wonderful for her to come and talk about programming, and we'll do that at another meeting where she'll talk about her ideal about how we're starting to do wraparound services, how we're training case managers to go from first contact with the shelter to actually getting housed and what we do in between to get people to that point. She's been great. And then the food. One of the greatest things that we did was to be able to staff up to feed 3 meals a day for 50 people at the village and 125 people at the shelter. And it is going great. We haven't always kept our staff. One of the things that we did was we hired a lot of guests as staff to work in the kitchen, and it has not always worked out, but they got opportunities. They were great, and then they just weren't ready for that type of employment. So I think we're down 2 positions, but we have a full-time, how do I say this? We have a part-time staff that's a permanent part-time kitchen assistant. She's been there for 4 years and she's great. We've hired another assistant. What is his title? It's not a kitchen assistant. He's more like a food supervisor. food service provider. He works from noon to 8, and he's doing a great job. And then we have Chef Mo. Chef Mo came to us from, he was working at a fraternity, at one of the fraternity houses as their head chef. He came on board and he has not missed a beat. Not only is he preparing the food and cooking the food, doing the menus, but he's also teaching people when they go in there. It's not just your cooking. He's teaching people how to prepare food. He's teaching people about sanitation. And I think I can see us doing some real good training programs for people that have an aspiration and want to do food service. Chef Mo would probably be a good fit to do that. And once we get really established with our food service at the shelter, we'll start to look at some of those opportunities. I can see that being really beneficial for people. So that was another accomplishment. The increased capacity. I know when I came on board, we were at 125 beds with the ability to ramp up to 140 to 445 beds for winter emergency shelter. And so winter emergency shelter, after those first 2 weeks, it started going really smooth when we started to really get comfortable with providing that many beds for people and working in communication or in concert with a lot of the other community agencies. And the last couple of days of that 2 weeks kind of set the tone for what we did after that. Anytime the weather got to 32 or below, it went really smooth for people to come in or not be exited that day, and it went great. So that was a great accomplishment. Also, the food service, we increased the capacity for food service. We started serving 3 meals a day. And breakfast is kind of hit and miss because we have a lot of guests that like to go to Jubilee. They like to go to other places for breakfast. And so during the beginning of that, we were preparing a lot of food and people were leaving. And so there was a lot of food. So we kind of cut down on that, and we still provide something, but it's not a full breakfast on those days. But on the days that Jubilee is not going to always provide a full breakfast. Staff feeding at the village has been a challenge because at the village, we don't have the capacity to have warmers and to prepare food there or to keep food warm there. So it has to be delivered from the shelter, and we take it over warm and they serve it, or they take it, prepare meals and people have to eat them up. But it's working out. With the new community center over there, we will have the capacity to have warmers over there. And so food service will be a little bit enhanced once we have the new community room. Our 90-day program, we actually ensuring that everybody meets with the case manager weekly. Our program coordination meetings are going strong, and we're actually talking about what the barriers are for every guest we have and how do we solve some of these things. And that's been really, really good. Our rapid housing program, when I started in January, we didn't have anybody enrolled. I don't think we have spent $1 of our rapid housing money. Even at the end of the first quarter, we might have had 2 people enrolled, but now we have 14 people enrolled in rapid housing. We should house actually 5 people in the month of July. They're slated to move. They have move-in dates for July, and that's just people. Yes.
Is the reason for the delay because needing to have the staff to provide that case management support for the rapid rehousing?
It was more training.
Oh, okay.
We had to actually train our staff from what is rapid housing to how we do it. And so instead of just doing the training, we started walking our staff through every procedure, and we did it collectively. So we would meet in a group, and case managers would take on guests, and then we would say, this is what they need, this is why, here's the paperwork. When Kim started, she reiterated that, and they have rapid housing meetings. I want to say weekly, it's either weekly or every other week, but they have either program coordination meeting or rapid housing meeting on a weekly basis. And so it has started to really be good. People we saw with a lot of barriers are actually getting housed. We've been able to work with community partners and landlords. We actually changed one of our case management positions to a rapid rehousing case manager, and that's all they do. We always had a housing navigator, and we had another rapid rehousing case manager, but they were more after people got housed, she would go and check in with them to do check-ins, which is really instrumental in for long-term sustainability and permanent housing. But now we have a case manager that what they do is actually do the paperwork and get people connected to actually move in here. And when they move in, the other case manager would start connecting with them and doing that. So that's been real instrumental.
And your that, when you talk about the training and the paperwork, that's all in accordance with, because it's a ESG
Right, it's
funded
state
program, so it has to be
the way they say.
safe. Fidelity isn't the right way, but like, there is a program for it that you have to follow.
So there's an overall program that governs rapid rehousing, but at any time any agency applies, they say with these rules for the federal program of rapid rehousing, here's how we plan to utilize the rapid rehousing money as an agency. This is what we're gonna do. And so we had to start looking at that, and it's no small task. I think it's more than just paying somebody's rent. It's a lot more than that. For it to be really successful, and I didn't want to just start paying someone's rent just to use the money. I wanted our case managers to really understand how to do this, why to do this, and how a program will look, and that's what it's turning out to be. Today I had a 90-day meeting with the guests, and it was one of the it was a wonderful experience to sit there with our guests, and we talking about things like a family, about them cleaning their own restrooms and things like that. And it was not a contentious meeting. It was more of a meeting where we're all working to do better. It was just really wonderful to do that. It was a good meeting. We had fun at the meeting. Kim was doing the same thing at the village, having weekly, or they might either meet weekly or every other week with guest meetings where they're coming to talk about whatever they need to talk about. We're talking about expectations, we're talking about the rules, and those things are a big deal when it comes to our guests. That's the time where they have to talk to us about everything that they like or don't like, what they want. We have a time to explain some of the way we're changing some of the expectations, or we're fine tuning some of the things. And it's going really good. Kim said this was one of the best. She had one last night at the village, and she said it was a great meeting compared to when she did the first one, maybe a month and a half or 2 months ago. So
I was gonna ask about the village too, and the supports that clients get. There was someone who made a public comment at the county commission meeting last night, expressing concern about whether or not individuals with severe and persistent mental illness are able to stay successfully at the village. And I just wonder, obviously that was public comment, but how are folks, are you able to support folks with is it reasonable to be able to provide supports for someone that has a severe and persistent mental illness, or how do you go about it?
with limitations.
Yeah.
A lot of our staff are not trained for the mental health case management. So what we do is we do the best we can with restating expectations to get to know people. If they build relationships with our folks, that helps a lot. And then so when there's episodes or when people are having hard times, we start to call their case managers from the mental health center. We call anybody that we know they work with to try to help de-escalate some of those situations. But we're seeing a lot of mental health crisis. People are in crisis, and a lot of that has been exacerbated by drug use. So one of the things that we have to do sometimes is exit people because their behavior at that time is just not tenable to that environment. And a lot of times it's for mental health, either stemming from mental health or substance abuse. We're finding a lot of individuals that can't not partake in substances while they're at the village. It's bad, and so.
And I don't think my understanding or expectation of the Pallet Village was ever that you would be able to provide that higher level of support.
It's not.
That was not mine, and I'd rather it's reliant upon the partnerships
Right.
with the community agencies, so whether that's their case manager or mobile response team, things like that, and so I think it's just important to acknowledge, I want to acknowledge that was never an expectation that I had of the way that the
Right.
health would be run, but that how important it is to have those partnerships with the other agencies to support you all.
Right. One of the things Kim has been working on is developing closer relationships with the case managers and how to make connections with the case managers when we need them. And just saying you're welcome to come whenever you need to. And we've been open to do that. We'd like to see some people more than others. But you're right, the expectation was never that it would be that level of need. It would be people that had the vulnerabilities, but didn't have the needs for additional staff on site. It was always that they were connected with case managers in the community and they could seek out those case managers on a routine basis to do that. And so you're right, it was never that. But that's what we're seeing. And so it's.
Thanks for that.
That's what we're seeing, and we're dealing with it, because even though a lot of times behaviors could be, people could be exited for their behaviors daily, but we don't do that. We just don't do that. We try not to, but when it's coupled with somebody with mental health concerns and then substance abuse, and then actively having drugs or alcohol on the facility, we just have to draw a line. And so what we try to do is say, we need you to get an assessment and follow the recommendations. But we struggle with, does that make them ineligible to be at the village? Well, what we're starting to do is say, you can always be in our night by night program. We're not gonna say you can't have shelter, but the village is not the place for those level of need. And we're working towards that, but people get options, they get a chance. And we try to work their chance. We've even allowed people to come back. So what we're seeing at the village, which is, it's a good thing, is we see a lot of people that are just not there. And it's really hard to exit somebody. Well, it's not hard, but you're not here, we're gonna exit you because you're never here. They don't make the curfew, and it's not more of a curfew violation, it's more of, we have a bed for you, and you're not utilizing that bed. This is an emergency shelter. If you have other places to live, then this is probably not the place for you. But people don't necessarily stay there, and so we don't do it all the time. We do give warnings for people not making curfew. We've had to say that you get a grace period, curfew's at 10 o'clock, if you're not by 10, you get a grace period to 10:30. We haven't heard from you, and if you show up after 10:30, we're not gonna let you in because you didn't come back within that grace period. Then they meet with their case manager to talk about what the expectations are going forward. And if anybody needs a pass for something, you can't just call at 9 o'clock and say, hey, I need a pass for tonight. It has to be something you talk about with your case manager to kind of understand what your needs are, and then you can get a pass. We don't really say what you have to be doing to have a pass. Because if you need a pass, plan your pass, you talk to your case manager, and then we approve the pass. And so we're kind of fine tuning a lot of these things when it comes to passes and things like that.
Thanks, sorry to take that.
That's okay. No, we're gonna have good conversations.
James, I'm curious if the staff are working at both locations.
Yeah.
And what's their experience been? Do they find that, do they enjoy kind of being able to try working at two locations, or?
You know,
Is there a
they're
preference?
different locations, they're different. You can go over to the village at 11 in the morning, 10 in the morning, you might not see anybody but staff. But you can go sometimes and you'll see everybody. At the village, the shelter is in a building, it's in a warehouse, and you're indoors. In the village, you have a little 100-foot cabin, that's the staff desk, you have a community room, or you have other offices that are 100-foot. And so there's not a lot of indoor space to do that. If the DSAs are in the DSA office, it's crowded. 2 people in there, it's kind of full. So it's just a different atmosphere. You go to the restroom, you have to come out, go into a trailer restroom, use restroom and come back out. So it's just a different environment. But the village is so rewarding to be out there in the trees and meeting with the guests. Everybody has their own place. If people want to go get some alone time, they have a place to do that. And so it's just a great place to be. And it's changed since we opened the first time. We had a lot of the expectations of our guests were they needed places to stay because the campus closed. And so they met the criteria, but it wasn't their first choice to be there. And so they came in, they were really resistant. We still have some folks that are still there, and now they really appreciate having the building. Some people didn't work out, and mainly because of drugs and alcohol. But the staff like the options of working both places.
Then we wanted to kind of transition into the next topic in another 10-15 minutes, but do you have other accomplishments you wanted to highlight before moving on to challenges?
Yep, some of the shelter improvements. We actually have a facility now that we believe is sanitary and secure. And the expectations with our guests are to keep it that way. So the staff have really bought into adhering to the cleanliness of the building, and it's amazing. Just like the 90-day meeting, we remodeled the whole 90-day area where we pulled up the old carpet and put down tile. We painted everything, everything's clean. Actually, we just purchased 4 new washers. They were just installed yesterday, but we had washers that would work half the time. Your laundry would get clean or they'd be soaking wet. They take forever to dry in our dryers because the washers would bring them out. And so we got new washers. They were just so happy about that. It's just the most simplest things that get people happy. So we've improved that 90-day area. Now people want to be there. Even though there are some people that don't want to be a 90-day, they'd rather be in night by night. If they're working, they want a day pass, which they get. But that just illustrates that we have to have as many options as possible because people are different. They have different needs. We have people that rather live in the shelter than go to the village and have their own place. That's not enough for them. They like being in a place with more people. Some of the staff are like that. They don't want to work over there. They want to be in a building with more people. They don't want to work in isolation like that. So I think a lot of that is good. But the 90-day area, what we've done is enhance that. That's kind of leading into some of the things we're going to do, but we just expanded that by 10 women. So we've got 10 more spots. So normally we would have, with Monarch open, we would have about 30 people in our 90-day program, continuous stay. We've expanded that by 10 more beds, so we're gonna have about 40 when we get everybody in. Right now, I think we have enough scheduled to be about 30, almost up to 36. I just got that count before I came today. But then we wanna maybe look at expanding it by 4 more. So our continuous stay will be up to about 40 beds, where people will be working on programming, getting into rapid housing, self-resolving, or doing a lot of those other things. So that's gonna be good. And then I'm gonna go ahead and segue into priorities for coming up, if that's okay. The first priority we're looking at, one of the main priorities is doing Pilot 32, which is a village-like structures in the parking lot of the shelter. It'll be 32 cabins with, I believe, 2 shower trailers and restrooms, an office. They will be able to house up to 64 people because there'll be 2-person cabins with, they'll be for night by night, so people will come in, sleep, leave. That'll be our night by night program. If we have weather emergency, we can actually use that for, overflow for weather emergency, which leaves us with a lot of space in the warehouse. For my idea was to have a 30-day program, which would be our short-term program that people can self-resolve, and that don't need a lot of things in order to, they just need a week or 2 to get themselves together so they can self-resolve. Or it's somebody who's not chronically homeless. So there's a big difference. People are chronically homeless and they come with a lot of systemic things that have happened to where they can't self-resolve quickly. But there are people that, if we give them the opportunity to self-resolve, they can do it within 30 days. And so that's what I imagine. Or people might not know if they want to be in a 90-day program, but they know they don't want to be a night by night. They just want more time. So this will be the time where we get to develop relationships with people while introducing them to our programming and getting to know what they need so we can start to identify if we can provide that or how we can connect them with the services that they seem to be. So the priority for after the village is to expand 90-day and create a 30-day program, which would give us 3 different options for people to be in the shelter. I think that will help people say yes instead of saying no. A lot of the changes that I talked about earlier have already changed the atmosphere of the shelter to where our staff feels safer, our guests believe in the rules, they believe in the changes that we're making, and they like it. So I think that's gonna just make that much better. Part of that Poly 32, the whole program that we're working with the city for the special uses to develop restrooms. We need more restrooms in the shelter and we need storage space. Storage is something that we don't have. We're continuously asking people to downsize what they store. They should just have one tote, but we have people that have multiple totes. Over a period of time, they accumulate a lot of things, which we continue to have to ask people to identify because we run out of room. And so with the storage, we will have more room to have storage that we can utilize. That will be a lot better. We have more people in the shelter. We need more space for people to store their things. So that's going to be something that we do. Another priority, working with a place for everyone on the emergency shelter. We're actively seeking out options to do a family shelter, women's and family and children's shelter, which I think is a crucial piece that's missing. It is so disheartening to see people, talk to people that want to come in the shelter that have children and we can't accommodate them. So we're actively working to do that. I think that's going to be a game changer to provide some more options for people to do that. And I think we're getting closer to doing that. We know it's going to happen. So that's a priority.
Has a potential location for that been identified?
Several times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a budget. The county commission is entertaining a one-time request for funding to go to the city to acquire a property. So we're making progress, but I think the challenge is gonna be, I don't, not necessarily assuming that LCS will lead that. Doesn't mean LCS wouldn't lead a family shelter. We just have to go through a process,
Right.
But at least like acquiring the asset is something that the city and the county are working together on right now. And then go through a process of identifying who would be the operator. I think it would look a lot like what happened with Pallet. But it'll be a little bit longer of a process, unfortunately, but I appreciate that it's an important thing for the organization.
It is.
The county's funding started with, it included, it is presumed that Lawrence Community Shelter was serving families, initially, and then when COVID happened, that stopped, and that's honestly okay, that's okay. Doing it all in that building was never a good idea, but our funding was always kind of predicated upon serving families as well, so I think that it'll just be, it's gonna be an interesting, process, an important process to figure out how it will be operated and who will operate it, and how will we fund it sustainably, and how will the community participate in funding the operations of that community resource.
I think that's a great need that we have, and since I'm on I co-convene the Mercy Shelter, I'm actively involved in that, and I can see how that would definitely be beneficial to the work that we do with the population that we serve. That family, it's just something that has to happen. Need a shelter for families. Because
So it helps to hear that the county had presumed that was part of the shelter operations. I've seen photos on the LCS Facebook page where children are clearly there. One story about an infant that was born, while the mom was staying at the shelter. I was curious, like, when and why did that ever stop? And, there was concerns around safety. I don't know if that was the primary reason why it stopped. Sounds like maybe it actually stopped when COVID occurred. So
They never resumed it after COVID, is my recollection.
is it?
So are you talking, when you say never resumed, are you talking about like the family promise component where families could stay in churches for a week?
Oh, no, not
No,
that,
not
just
that.
at the
At
Lawrence Community
LCS.
Shelter.
At the one.
Yeah, children used to be also staying at the shelter.
We did a little, I say we, because following COVID, I actually worked there for the better part of 2 years. We did a little bit,
Yeah,
but it was nothing formal, when a need arose, we would kind of figure out a spot.
Yeah.
Figure out a spot for a period of time, but I think most of it was, and perhaps still is, dealt with hotel. Getting them into a hotel for a night or, 2 or 3 or something like that, so.
So long-term,
Absolutely right, incredibly.
like, is it?
this is waiting to get in.
Oh, thanks. I guess I just think. How does the shelter, it sounds like one important priority is having multiple options. And how to do that now requires, 2 different locations, and I think having the 32 pallets in the back is gonna be helpful. But I do wonder, like, how, if LCS has historically provided shelter to families, like, is there any way to figure out how to bring that back? And I don't know how many, how many resources are being considered for purchasing a new facility, but upgrading the current facility, is that a reasonable thing to think through? Like, would it be worth expanding the shelter so that it has the right space to provide safe shelter for families?
I think, in my opinion, just thinking about the layout, it could be done, all that could be done, but should it be done? I think that there needs to be different locations for different populations. I think it's just, I see why it didn't come back, because having a low barrier shelter puts families at risk
Yes.
because of what happens in the other parts of the building. And keeping programs separate is good until it's not.
Yeah, and the environs are just not appropriate for you, like, you want kids to be out, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's why the Monarch Village didn't end up being what it was originally intended to be,
Right,
And that would be, if I would say, if I was tasked with doing something for families now, I would say Monarch would be the way to do it, but with the village coming back there, everything's gonna be gated, we would have to, it could be done. But it would definitely have to be secured in a way that it was on its own separate thing. But there's not a way to support that with the other things you need, like food and things like that, that they would still have to come to the main building. And we just don't have the
Yeah.
space outlined the way it is right now, but it could be done. But would it be appropriate? Would it be viable? It would be options for people that have none. But it wouldn't be ideal.
I also think that having a really high functioning rapid rehousing program, that it has like, puts as much firepower into serving families. Because if I'm channeling my Dana Ortiz family promise hat, it's families you should minimize the amount of time that families are in shelter because of the collateral damage that it causes. And getting them as quickly as possible into housing, and that's where I won't jump ahead, but rapid rehousing is having a very, very, very robust rapid rehousing program for families and singles is. It's a key to our success and a place for everyone, and it's every other high functioning community that does homelessness prevention and solutions has rapid rehousing. So I love that you have so much focus on it, and again, I think that could be a better tool for families rather than overbuilding a shelter for families.
With that being said, I would look at project-based rapid rehousing.
Yeah.
Instead of it being client-based, or instead of having leases with landlords and guests, it would be landlords and programs. Kind of like master leasing, but the difference is how that would come about. So if a family came in and said, well, I have a need and I'm homeless, what we would do is house them in a hotel and then find a landlord that we could rent from that would accommodate that family. That would be eligible for rapid rehousing for that family for 12 months. And that family could live there for 12 months until they are able to transition into their own permanent housing. Or a good thing would be to transition right there. If the landlord was able to say, well, this family's done pretty well, they can start doing a lease with me, that could be their permanent housing. That would probably be the best way to do families, so they didn't have to come into a program. If you, the best way to house is to not ever go into a shelter.
Yeah.
So we can keep
Still
people
need
in
to
the
have
housing.
something,
Right,
a little
right,
bit of
right.
something.
Something, that's why
Yeah.
I was saying maybe a hotel, motel, till we found that place, or something like that. There could be, they could stand in like in a Monarch until we found a place that we could rent, and it would be easier for a program to rent a place than it would be for a person to rent a place. We wouldn't be tasked with having to do a background, right, the history, rental history and things like that. So it's possible to do that, and there's always options. I was never able to make that work when I was at Kansas Housing with ESG, but I always thought that would be a great way to do that. Because people model living in permanent housing, they just don't have the responsibility of the rent, but we can ensure that they have the ability to do that if they're there, we're working with them. So when they get to the next place, they've already modeled this for however long they're in that place, and it could be more successful that way. So I think that's a great way to do it. We might really talk about doing something like that, to institute that type of program with rapid rehousing. It could immediately work with families.
Would that involve them just identifying landlords that have a kind of willingness to rent
Yeah, to a
to
program.
us?
To a program.
It's a great idea.
Are they more likely or encouraged to rent to a program as opposed to?
I think so. For 12 months, that's any lease is usually a 12-month lease. The ideal for a landlord would probably be, start off at 12 months, but the tenant likes what they're doing. They continue to stay in that house for longer than 12 months. But they will be guaranteed a 12-month lease with the agency no matter what. So I don't see why that would be a deterrent unless they were looking for some long-term stability. And so the thing with project-based ESG is that you couldn't just keep paying the landlord to keep that one house for multiple families. You could split if somebody was in a 12-month lease in a project base. And they found a place that they could move into in 7 months. You can use the residual of those months for that 12-month lease for the family. But you couldn't after 12 months just say, we want to re-rent this without a family identified. So that's the difference. Every time you have a family, you have to find a different or a location for them. You could re-rent it, but one has to happen first. You have to have the family before you rent the home. So there's potential to work with the same landlords. But the timing has to be that there's a need for that place. You can't just have it on retainer and pay them. You just couldn't do that. So it's about the need of the families that you identify. But it's a great idea. So.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah. Another priority we have at the shelter is to start to do fundraising, donor engagement, build relationships with donors and organizing fundraising events. We've actually started to look at, we started our donor engagement program. Currently, we've put together mailers. We have our donor list, and we're starting to re-engage with donors to send out information. And we're just doing some innovative things. I've had 2 proposals for fundraisers, one for a 5K run and one for a golf tournament, I think. So we're gonna look into that. To start.
So people in this town love food events.
Okay.
And every time you say,
I got
we
one-
mention
I got
Chef
an idea.
Mo,
Yeah. I got an
it
idea.
just gets me excited a little to hear that, you know, and seeing the picture in the Lawrence Times
Mhm.
of him, it's like, I hadn't met him before, so
Okay.
it's like, oh, here's the face behind the name
Mhm.
that I keep hearing. And honestly, when I first got involved in LCS, when I learned that people weren't getting fed, that was the thing that like really got me. It's like, wow, that's a big miss in my mind. So I wonder, like, what's the way that, you know, Chef Mo gets kind of elevated, like, for the contribution he's making, and gives a chance for the community to just go eat, and it raises money. It's just such a simple way. It's like, I'd pay, you know, top dollar for a great evening with a good, you know, good meal and some entertainment. It's like we do. This town loves
I
that kind
mean,
of thing.
and
And it wouldn't take a lot to,
it would, and we,
Together.
Chef Moore and I have talked about that. Right now, we're just still getting our sea legs.
Sure,
I don't know why
sure.
that term came to me, but
yeah.
we're getting our sea legs, because we're actually on the boat, we're in the ocean. And we're moving around, we're.
Paddling.
We're really moving around.
That's the puking.
Listen, Chef Mo has been working, he, doesn't have a day shift, and so he's been coming in. Chef Mo is awesome. That's why I wanted to highlight
Mhm.
our directors, that he is dedicated to making sure it runs, and so we're doing some things, but that is I've always liked that idea of highlighting what he does with the food, and because it's more than just eating. It is about, you know, our culture, we do a lot of celebratory things around food.
Mhm.
Food brings us together as family.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things, and if we could do that with food, for the 4th of July, Chef Mo, would that work?
One of the,
James, you're such a good storyteller that's the one problem with the 5K and a golf tournament. You don't get that opportunity to share the story with people because they're running away from you or they're putting away from you. And you are such a dynamic storyteller, and you have people who are surrounded by you who are really passionate about it. And I just think that if you could find an opportunity to have an event where people can speak to the mission directly to people, I think you're going to find a lot of success there. So that would just be my recommendation as you're kind of thinking about events. Find an opportunity to tell story in front of people.
It's coming,
and you know, he's one staff, but there are other staff.
we got a lot of.
I just
I
get
have great
excited to
staff.
see.
I said
them
that
get
before, I
attention.
have great staff.
Yeah.
Great staff, and the passion is what, you know, people, people, as human beings, we can fake a lot of things. You can't fake passion. I have people that are so passionate about what they do. And every time we have to turn somebody away, it hurts all of us. No matter if they need it or not, or we just can't keep them, it hurts. John, you know how that feels. It just hurts, but one thing we have to know is that we have to stay in business for the ones that are left behind. We always try to circle back and talk about how can we re-engage with folks. But if they have to go, we're understanding they have to go. And that's really tough, it's really tough. So fundraising, the last thing, one of the other priorities for me in the Lawrence Community Shelter is training. We're starting to do a lot of training, and Kim is gonna do a presentation when she, by the time Kim is working really hard right now. But she is looking at developing training. I think Bella is gonna be doing some mental health first aid training. I know we have one with the city, but one of my staff, Bella, is a trainer also. And so we've instituted that. We're starting to do some training, and I think with shift work, it's always hard to get people from every shift into training. So it's not gonna be something that happens immediately. We can't shut down and train everybody, but we can start to send different people at different times, and we're still working that out. There's a lot of moving parts to what we're doing. And eventually, this next 6 months is where we kind of identify how we're gonna do all those things that enhance the work that we're doing, providing shelter. I think that's all I have for
Well, thanks, James.
improvements and
I appreciate you kind of reviewing everything that has been accomplished since you started, and I think, I was just feeling also like, as a board, we haven't really thought about what accomplishments we've made, but I really appreciate how engaged everyone is, and I was on the board prior to this board, and only for a couple months really before it changed, but the difference that it makes to have all of you involved has been tremendous. And I know Shannon, are you there? Yeah, you guys make a real big difference, and I hope that you feel appreciated for that, because a lot has changed in a year, and you were a critical part of it. So I feel like that needs to be acknowledged in our kind of reflection on progress that we made. So,
Yeah, and Charlie, I am here, and I just want to echo that and say, thanks to James and his staff, because they've done amazing work, and it's been great to be on this board and to actually be part of something that really made some serious systemic change in a really short period of time, and it's just very honoring to be part of that, because it's something we needed for a long time, and I think we're really getting there. It's part of our housing continuum, and there's so many people working on all the parts, but I'm really happy to be part of this part for the homelessness and the first stage of addressing this issue. So thanks.
Thanks, Shannon. All right, so we're gonna take on the next topic tonight. I asked Misty and Jill if they might join us, talk about kind of how they see priorities for LCS in the next 6 to 12 months. Last year and toward October, I think it was last year, we had a similar dialogue, and I think you guys laid it out, and this board, the new board, had really taken, they unanimously kind of said, yes, we're ready to take that on. So now I think a lot of the accomplishments we made kind of reflect that commitment, and question in front of us is like, what else is there? What do you see as our, if there's a challenge that maybe we're not recognizing, or accomplishments maybe we didn't recognize, kind of your reflections on it, and then how do you see, prioritization for the next the rest of this year, and then going into next year? And
Hey,
so,
guys.
yeah.
I'm parking. Could you just give me 2 minutes before you
Oh, yeah,
say
you
anything
come
else?
inside. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, we can wait. Jill can
All
pass
right,
some
thank-
time. She has something she can say.
We talked about rapid rehousing. I think that's a huge priority. And I know that that's been something that Misty and I have talked about. And looking at, how we, position, whether it's the city or LCS to apply for the COC funding to bring in dollars to support the have a rapid. Douglas County leaves money on the table, all the time in the COC grants. Because we don't have agencies, we don't have, Douglas County is the only organization that. Oh, it's.
Yeah, put that on mute. Mr.
Um. For the past, as long as I've been actively participating in the balance of state COC. Continuum of care, they have a grant competition for HUD funds every year. And. We have not had consistently. Or at all, any applicants for COC funds. From Douglas County. During COVID, we had a couple one-offs, that. James was helpful with, but that was not through the balance of state, that was not through the COC, so every year the COC has a competition with HUD funds. And they facilitate applications for projects like operations at LCS, for rapid rehousing. Douglas County we wrote a grant for, I wrote a grant 2 years ago for a permanent supportive housing program. So we have funding for 12 units of permanent supportive housing that we were able to launch this year. It's not a lot of money. It's $321,000, but it's dedicated 100%. So that means we're only serving chronically homeless folks. But Douglas County is the only agency getting funds from HUD. So we're leaving money in Douglas County on the table. So I think it's so important that LCS and or the city of Lawrence be applying for as much money as possible in that COC. We are leaving HUD money on the table, and I know it's not easy money to get. Because it's HUD, but you know how to do that, Missy knows how to do that, and I know Shannon can do that with their eyes closed, unfortunately. But I think we need to prioritize rapid rehousing and getting the funding to do it through the COC. And getting any other funding out of the COC that we can possibly get. To leverage the funds that we have from the city and the county. So that's like a financial goal priority paired with a programmatic goal that I think advances a place for everyone. And that is, again, the rapid rehousing. I think rapid rehousing serves everybody. But I think it could be a really important stopgap for families as we work towards having a family shelter open. But it's also, we talked before about, it's a more trauma-informed approach to serving families. Having more rapid rehousing available. So, I mean, I have nothing but confidence in everything that you said about that trajectory. And then the last one, I think for us is, for the county at least, and I'm sure the city as well, is just understanding the financial sustainability and appealing to the community to be a shared partner in funding all of this work. And I think that's the opportunity with the family shelter is huge for that. I don't think it's just gonna be increasingly hard, for the city and the county to grow our commitment. I don't want to speak for the city because theirs is much larger, but I think that we have to continue to articulate, the opportunities for the community to partner. And again, I think the family shelter is a prime opportunity. It's a value statement. That it's an opportunity for the community to say that we do value caring for our families. So I think it's a great opportunity. And I think with the shared governance on the board, it's that we have the opportunity to advocate for that as a city, a county, and a shelter.
Thanks, Jill.
Do I have anything different to say? those were my points too.
Hey, I was gonna say, one more thing, I think it's always important also that the county wants to make sure, and a guy by the city's the same, that we're identifying where our partners in the community need to step up a little bit more. And I think, so whether that's providing those supportive services, crisis response services, things like that, I think it's really hard to expect the LCS to be all things to all people. So understanding where we need to have better partnerships. The county underwrites a substantial contract with Heartland Radac that hopefully those services are still beneficial to folks. And so I think just communicating, what's going well, what's going not, and, doing that obviously with the contractors that are there first, but, when things aren't going as well. And I mean, I know that in the past, there's been questions around, making sure that there's a strong partnership between organizations like maybe the hospital. And even do you have a strong partnership for how organizations will work together as it relates to really vulnerable clients? And I don't want to just call out one organization, necessarily the hospital, because that's just one piece of the ecosystem. So I think we want to make sure that, our partners that we are, that we are engaged with actively, that they're holding up their end of the bargain, and we can help facilitate that advocacy on behalf of LCS, because we can't expect you all to do everything.
I appreciate you saying that. It's been on my mind, like, as you built the leadership of the shelter, where that work, kind of lies, like, how are you imagining? Like, is that your work to do to build those partnerships? Is it Kim's work as she's thinking about programming? That it's not all LCS staff trying to do everything, but it's the partnerships to do that.
I think
programming?
it's my work, honestly.
Okay.
It kind of
Well, sure.
aligns with KDAD's mission for the position that I took before becoming director, but I'm doing both. So, but I think that is my job is to kind of take down the silos, bring people together, build processes and procedures that work. And we are doing that. We met with the hospital recently. We have another follow-up this month in a couple weeks, and we are working on a way to complement each other's work and to stay connected. We're doing that in our emergency shelter work group when we are talking about different policies and procedures that could help each other. One thing that just came out of my legal department today is a policy for helping individuals that are here but they're actually from another community. So we've written a policy, and so any contract that I have in going out is going to have that policy in it. And like everybody at the table kind of said, yeah, I think we're going to adopt this too. And so we're gonna try to push that out as much as we can, but we're looking at, James said, 3-day respite. And while they have space, maybe at LCS, that we have our case managers that we're paying for, working with them, trying to get them connected back to their former community. So just things like that, just taking down our silos and just all of us working together. And we have an event coming up in a couple of weeks, and it's all of the case managers that we contract with at Burt Nash. It's the homeless response team and the LCS case managers, and we're gonna have a luncheon, but we're also gonna have a meeting, and we're also gonna, it's a fun luncheon. But it's just, to me, it's really important that we're all speaking the same language and we're all doing the same thing, and we all have the same goals, and we all have the same trainings. And so just, so we're all working together, it's not us versus them, we all have to be doing the same thing, the same work. And so that was one of my goals is, making sure that everybody that's doing case management at LCS is getting to the same trainings that we're providing, just so we're on the same page. And so staff development trainings, I heard you say that too already. Definitely the working on donor relations was on my list also. And we have a contract with Barry Thieger to support that work for you guys as well. And he is able to do any staff development as well. He has great experience in that. And James, we're already meeting about that as well. And then you guys already talked about rapid rehousing.
So we've already got three things captured, like the rapid rehousing, the grant. You know, it's like kind of
CLC.
blended that together, financial sustainability. Community kind of, you know, based on our fundraising and donor relations work. And then this partnership, which maybe isn't really clearly yet, so. Is it, like, obviously, we should act as good partners, but like, I feel like Jill, you were. Maybe trying to get a little more there, like, is it how we get feedback to the, like, where. My concern would be that if, like, what I've heard historically is LCS has. Wanted to do everything themselves instead of. Thinking through a partnership model where it's bringing in resources that work collaboratively to help people.
Care coordination versus case, like you need a bit of both. You need to coordinate care for folks at different agencies, because LCS, you know, is case managers are working with folks that need care at Heartland. And so how do you coordinate, like, so it's a balance of both, but sometimes I think what Misty's talking about is you need to make sure that the coordination is being reciprocated with the different partners, no matter who it is, whether it's Bert Nash or Heartland or the hospital, making sure that those silos don't exist, that the LCS case managers it's not moving heaven and earth to get the care that clients need to get them to their next step. And I think that's the work that Misty's been doing, and it does take a dedicated focus, unfortunately, and I think that's largely what's been missing. I don't think it was the intent in the past for LCS to do all things. And I also wanted to say that about the, you know, applying for those COC grants. It's a capacity issue. So I think you know, priorities and where do you put capacity? And I think that's what's great about the city putting the capacity into Misty's position. Take the time to make sure that those partnerships are there, and her position is modeled after the county's director of behavioral health position, and that's to make sure all the partners are working together. But what I was thinking about is, you know, a lot of conversation has happened in the past around related to a place for everyone, not having enough in it related to providing mental health supports and substance use disorder supports. And I think that's why we want to have these strong partnerships. We have resources available in this community to provide crisis response, substance use disorder treatment through our partnerships with DECA, Bert Nash, Heartland, and others. We have to get folks to those resources, and the work that our director of behavioral health and the different partners in the system have been doing these last 5+ years is tremendous. The resources are there. We just have to have this strong continuum that Misty is helping, I think, to just, like, you know, put some pavement down on. And the leadership to have the relationships with other executive directors to make sure that you can have those frank and honest discussions about how to partner and how to grow as a community.
Jill, you've mentioned the place for everyone, and I know that there are so many facets and so many moving parts to that. Let's talk a little bit about how the Lawrence Community Shelter connects to the place for everyone, if it does at all, because I know that you've talked about how you are part of the work group and facilitate those conversations. You talked a little bit too about, before you reported about the number of folks in rapid rehousing, and then a little bit about ESG funds, but you also talked about what I think is something important too, that is captured in a place for everyone as far as community conversations and our priority and a focused population. Maybe tell a little bit, because as I remember those really great community conversations, there was a focused population that came as a result of understanding who is at the most need. And the most need and the margin most, I believe, was, and help me out here, was it women
Yes.
And so we understand that, those who identify as women were a focused population. Could you talk to me a little bit about how the LCS is helping a place for everyone's priority population? Connect that with how we're putting people in housing and supporting women? Because you did talk about how the transfer or how you're doing a little bit of the organization internally is helping to bring in more women, staying in that space. So can you talk a little bit about that? So that we're making those connections, because I think there's so many, there's workers connected to this work, but how are we aligning? And focusing on what priorities are for the community to express that, and then also utilizing how we're moving in Lawrence Community Shelter to address those priority populations to be served. So maybe take that conversation we had just out in the space and talk a little bit about how internally you're moving to support women or people identified as women. to have
So that was in
Yeah.
expanding the 90-day program. I want to expand the 90-day by, it's 30 now, up to about 30. I wanted to go to about 60, or not fully 60 until we get the pilots done. So I said, well, what can we do now to expand 90-day? I want to prioritize women coming into the 90-day program. So we've actually offered 10 women spaces in the 90-day program. We did that today.
Wow.
But 2 of those are not new to the program. 8 of those are, so we have 2 more spots that we're gonna offer the women to come into the 90-day program. That's how we're gonna do that, because one of the things that I've always heard about the Lawrence and the homeless population is that the percentage of women that are homeless are not coming into the shelter. Why is the shelter not housing a lot of women? And there's a lot of reasons. Maybe the biggest one is the trauma related to being in shelter. And so knowing a lot of how trauma impacts homelessness, I wanted to create an atmosphere that is more conducive to, I won't say family, but togetherness. I want people to be comfortable and not have to worry about just not being safe, not feeling safe. And that has to start with our staff have to feel safe. It has to be a sanitary environment that we pride ourselves on it being clean and conducive to safety. And so that's one of the things that our staff wanted. We started doing that, and it's starting to come around to feeling like that. So I have people not wanting just to be in the shelter, but not wanting to conform to some of the rules. So they're not there yet. So they're still in night by night. And so doing that, we're gonna open it up to as many women that want to be in 90-day, we're gonna accept them going forward. We only house in our night by night program average 10 women. That's not a lot.
And what's the total number? So 10 out of,
65.
okay.
So 90, that's what we had last night. I think that's what I remember, 65. So we had about 83 people in the shelter last night.
Night by night.
Half 20 something of those were continuing to stay, the rest was not.
I got you.
And so it's probably only about 8 to 9 to 10 women.
And night by night.
Good night. So why do they even have to leave? Why even leave? And have to stay in the 90-day program. And so I know once that happens, that changes the feel of the shelter by having that many people there all the time. And that could be the start of how it changes the whole feeling of what we do at the shelter, and could be conducive to people wanting to be in the shelter because more people are being served. They're being given opportunities to do some constructive things that they don't have to leave. We already have enough food for people to eat. It's not nobody's hungry in the shelter. We have the space, it's clean. So why not fill those beds? We have a women's dorm that's already utilized. So why don't we take advantage of that? So that's what we're gonna do. As far as the conversation that came about, I wasn't part of those conversations.
No, right.
But I heard enough about, I heard that in Topeka about the number of women that were homeless versus that were in the shelter. And I know we could fix that. So it might not work this first time, but we can still stay by offering those opportunities. We can prioritize it. Because we know they're a population that needs to be prioritized, so why don't we just do it?
I think it's worth having a discussion and maybe talking to staff, maybe having, and we've talked in the past about having like some focused listening sessions with females that are active. We had listening sessions before, but understanding, what are some of the unique, get their feedback, and we talked about that, like even just with like STA Care Center, helping with that, but I think it would be really interesting over the next year, James, to just don't assume that, like, I think it sounds like you're making tons of progress, but I think the city and the county would back you up and the work group to go down that path of trying to understand why do we have this disparity and how do we respond to it in a way that we think is meaningful to the community. Thank you for bringing that up, Christina.
Well, thank you, because I think you talked, and I think Missy also said some things that are key here, and it's appeal to the community. So all these conversations, the community had been the result in a collection of data that says, this is our priority, this is our focus bucket, this is the things that we're concerned about. I heard passion, all of those things appeal to the community. Since we had those community conversations for extensive time, and I think they warranted a lot of data that we could use to make sure that we're appealing to the community. So the community says that this is our priority population. Here we are addressing the priority population. What's the next population that we spoke to and addressed in those community conversations? So we can continue to have that conversation and that appeal and the value could say, well, this is what our community spoke to. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think that is a highlight, it's a challenge, but it's also a priority. And if the place for everyone has priority focused populations, and then we're addressing that too, that disseminates and
That brings up
that silos are not, so high.
We can prioritize, we can and we should prioritize population of folks because they're disproportionately represented in the population.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with women that are staying on the streets, and I've asked them, like, why do you choose this? And it's their safety, they feel safer outside than they do in the shelter. And so that gets me to thinking, like, we're not doing enough to take them to see what's changed, because everything's changed. The perceived safety out there now is going to be like night and day, with everything bright and open and security and, staff everywhere like that. It gives me goosebumps. It's just a different place. And so maybe we need to think about, doing a limits event during the day or Saturday. And that would be the strength of all of our case management coming together and wrapping around those women and we all work together to get them out there to do those. And they would come. I mean, most of them would come.
Spot and to
Oh,
to
yeah.
something like that. I don't know, that would be.
See,
that would be
yeah,
great.
we have hairdressers
Like
who
an
are
open
happy to
house.
help. Yeah.
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 I appreciate you bringing this up, Christina. I think it also fits in well. I heard a lot of challenges or interest in trying to do fundraising. And this is one that, like, people value that, just like you were saying, Jill, about families, like getting our community to partner up with us to do this work is gonna need us, we're gonna have to think about aligning with the priority populations, because that reflects what the community does value. And if we can give opportunity for people to say, yeah, I care about that too, and I'm willing to, help. So I grabbed that, I'm kind of transitioning us into the third part of our agenda. I'd like us to walk away feeling like the next, 6 to 12 months, here are where we want to focus and see progress. And be willing to think maybe beyond the contractual parts of our partnership with the city and the county. Because I really think our first 6 months has been, let's just get our house in order.
Yeah.
Get the house in order, do these basic things, and now that that's happening, we have space to breathe and think. And be more creative, and I think this is really creative,
Yeah,
thinking about how do we engage the community around this problem in a way that we know is gonna resonate with them, and families and women are gonna probably do that better than anything else we've done. So I think that's a great goal. Feel like there probably needs to be a goal around fundraising, like we really need to have some visible events and that donor engagement. I know you're starting, but I don't know if we wanna, I don't feel like we need to get out of here,
You could do some-
like exactly a target goal kind of thing, but just let's feel like we walk out tonight knowing that the next year is gonna look like this, and this. While we're meeting our obligations and commitment with the city and the county. So that can give us something to be passionate about, something to talk about, something to engage the community about.
My ideas are just.
Yeah, I think taking the time to engage with the women that are there, and I think Missy's idea to welcome, reintroduce it to folks is really important, and take the time to gather some information. And working with some of the female family serving organizations, I think that could be a great collaboration. STA, Willow, I think they would all really welcome that opportunity, and STA is actually kicking off a next planning cycle for a grant that they're gonna be doing a needs assessment. And this might, just to understand what are the needs in the community for sexual violence and prevention, and housing is a core part of that, so we could incorporate some of this into the planning effort, but I just think having a goal to do the work over the next 6 months to gather information and be able to say, here's what we heard, and here's how we're thinking of responding. That would be really impactful to just show that you've taken the time to listen. Because it feels like that is an expectation of this community and the folks that are experiencing it right now. They expect of us, they want us to stop and listen and be thoughtful about how we go about doing things, but I think you're making tremendous progress.
We'll prioritize women, raise funds. Is there a third thing we can imagine?
I know that you were talking about training and now that's being taken very forward movement with, I wrote down the new Kim's a programming person, deputy director, but in charge of like all things program development. Perfect. Yeah, development and training of staff. I know that came from a few of the staff and Lacey being one that's an adamant person talking about a place for everyone and the equity inclusion workers, but the training and in-house training and internal training for staff for some of those things, and maybe Kim's the one to talk about who's needing what or who's asking for what, but I know that some of that training that has to do with a lot of things. I'll let it go to you.
Yeah.
Talking about what that
We're definitely working on a criteria we want to implement and how to do that reoccurringly. So we can actually keep people proficient at the training that they receive. So that means initially training everyone and then doing reoccurring training annually. And so we're still in the process of figuring out what people need, but right now we need everything. So any training we get is positive. And so out of the trainings we get and that we're developing, we're going to put down a list and how they're going to be able to meet those goals.
Well, you're doing great, Christina. That's the third goal. I mean, that feels like a really clear path, right? And I believe it was one of our early meetings last year where you asked Melanie to kind of start to identify a list of training
Right.
aspirations from staff, and I don't know if that ever got passed on to
Yeah,
you.
we have it.
It was a pretty long list, so.
Well, I know that we talked about the STA Care Center, and I'm just going to go ahead and plug that in, but we are developing some programming for populations that are of focus, and one of them being houses population. So not to say anything about how that's going to work out, but I think the collaboration will be a very successful one if we continue to partner successfully. We do bystander intervention, we do some de-escalation, we also do some other trainings that I think will be effective, but I think that you definitely would help us develop what is needed for our community, because it's specifically to what the needs are for Douglas County. So continue keeping communication with that.
Shannon or Elizabeth. I know you're online there somewhere. Do you have any thoughts on our, you wanna add anything in? Elizabeth is thinking. All right, just don't wanna ignore you guys.
No, there's been good ones thus far, and you know, I know kind of in our last meeting where we were talking about, you know, James's goals, you know, some of those, of course, are, you know, we're focusing on next for him. You know, some of those still resonate, of course. I mean, we still have a lot to do, especially when it comes to ballot 32 and things like that. So, you know, I think, yeah, I feel good about where we are on goal wise and how we're on track. I do think that there's a lot of grant opportunity that I think could be explored that probably haven't been explored yet. So from a fund development standpoint, kind of outside of that donor relationship standpoint, because there's so many aspects of the work of what LCS does that spans grant opportunities between food, between housing, between employment, things like that. So, you know, grant systems is definitely something that I think there's a lot of opportunity for us.
I recall very well, Commissioner Dever asking the question around like our growing dependence on city dollars. I think it's critical that we don't just sit around waiting to get on top of like diversifying the funding stream and cannot assume that there's political will forever to put this kind of money toward the issues we face, so. And LCS has in the past raised money, so like. Definitely this, I would agree with that. And I think including the grants is kind of sounds consistent with what you shared, Jill, like fundraising events, grants, donations. I threw down developer workforce as kind of a way to capture that in training.
And maybe to include too, I know that Elizabeth is still doing a lot of great work with, the advisory board, and we're still talking about that, but maybe, developed or like maybe a, a mission and vision for the advisory board, but pulling it as advisory board.
I didn't give an update on
I haven't heard of the advisory board updates, yeah, I'd love to know.
The meeting for the advisory board is gonna be on the 16th, our first meeting.
First meeting on 16th, okay.
Yep. We're gonna meet and we're gonna go. I can just say what's on the agenda could not.
We said July 16th.
Mhm.
So I guess the only thing I would add is I think these three goals are great. Because I think they turn us towards the future and away from.
Shannon, we're having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if you want to get closer to your microphone or.
I don't know. I don't know about my connection. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I really like these goals because I think it turns us away from sort of the crisis management that we've been in into more aspirational goals about how to serve specific populations, how to make sure we keep the really great staff that James has built. And so I just really, I like the direction of our goals rather than sometimes when you see them put in there, like continue to, you know, do X, Y, Z. And I really think this gives us somewhere to go and to grow.
Thanks, Shannon.
So our advisory board, we're meeting on July the 16th from 4 to 5, I believe. We're going to do welcome and introductions. We're going to have a history and overview of LCS. We did put in a Zoom option. We felt it would be best to have our first meeting at the shelter. We don't know how many people have been at the shelter, but we also know that an advisory board should have as many options to attend as possible. So we did, it was Zoom. We're gonna discuss current needs and priorities. We're gonna discuss the frequency of our meeting schedule, how we wanna meet, and then next steps. But one of our priorities for meeting is to determine how many more board members we need. I think we have 6 right now, and I think we want to have 10, at least 10. And so we're going to look at, how did I phrase this? Actually picking parts of our community where we would see that would be beneficial to have somebody from that community on our board, advisory board. So there's 6 people that have already been approved, voted in. We'll get to determine what those priority populations or priority community, where the new advisory board members should come from, what part of the community. So I thought that would be best for them to start as a board to kind of give them something to work on, because I'm just there to help facilitate, or I don't want to be influential at all about the work they do, but just to provide as much information and connection to the agency as possible. And so they still need to flesh out what their actual roles are going to be as an advisory board, what their priorities are going to be. And so, but the first way is to how to grow that board by 4 more members, and where should they look to actually recruit members from. So that's going to be the priority, and that's going to take on. I mean, that's enough for the first meeting, is us getting to know each other, learning about LCS, and then identifying that. So that's our first meeting. And then we'll talk about how frequent they want to meet and those types of things. The already scheduled, it's what
You know, when we were getting things moving, beginning of, or the end of last year, as our new board came on, our meeting frequency, you know, I mean, we picked it up a lot.
Yeah.
We wanted to get things done before the end of the year, and so that was part of that. I just throw it out there, like, the committee might consider, like, not setting a schedule that's gonna be set in stone forever, but like thinking, what do they need for now?
Flexible.
And how does that, you know, then they can adjust it, but, you guys have a lot more flexibility because it's not a public meeting. But I think it's a great goal, because it is something that's, you know, it was part of the change of our bylaws. And in some ways it was kind of a way to say, the new board's gonna be this smaller thing. And we still wanna have a space for others to be engaged and be able to have some influence over, you know, the direction we're taking and all that. Jill, yeah, sure.
No, it made me think of something. I was wondering, along the engagement and advisory, I'm thinking in the past, there were, as an obligation to have good neighbor meetings with the Prairie Park neighborhood, and I think it's important to keep doing something like that, because I think it's really special that that neighborhood is such a good neighbor. And I don't think that neighborhood gets celebrated enough, because it's so important. And when you think about resistance that other parts of the community may have, like, I think that needs to, I think that that's ebbed and flowed in the past about what that engagement looks like, but I think it's an important opportunity, especially when you talk about expanding the pallet village, making sure that folks know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing, and addressing, you know, head on some of the safety concerns that folks may have. And, you know, I'll bet the sheriff's office would be happy to join you in some of that stuff as being a good neighbor as well. I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but I just think that neighborhood needs to be celebrated. It's really special what they do.
And I've known that's been on one of the things that I have to been tasked to do. In relation to a lot of things. I think we have a meeting scheduled. Corey, I think, did Corey schedule a meeting recently coming up, and it was to talk about adding the community building to the village, but we could segue into a lot of the other things we need to talk about, because I think we have participants from a lot of the neighborhoods are invited to this meeting that we're having. But talk to Lacey, our communications person, about that good neighbor meeting and how do we reinstitute doing that?
That's great.
We'll do that.
Jill, were you thinking maybe the good neighbor, just that relationship might be supported by like one of the advisory committee members coming from the neighborhood?
I don't know, maybe. It could be actually a really good idea to think about having somebody from Prairie Park. And it's Pinckney, right? That is asking, that might be an actually outstanding idea to have on the advisory board. Give them a seat at the table. And then that could maybe help rebuild what those good neighbor meetings look like. And take a little off here, like, but still, yeah, both neighborhoods. I didn't even mention Pinckney, but both
Yeah.
neighborhoods. But I think Prairie Park kind of gets forgotten sometimes because they've been doing it for so long.
Other thoughts, like as we think about goals, like I would be. I'd hope that those goals then could be communicated to the advisory committee for their own, like. Feedback to us, like they're thinking, yeah, we missed something, or. If there's something they'd like us to think, to also consider. If we're gonna prioritize women, maybe some of the organizations that might, be aligned with that priority can also be thought of as members of the advisory committee. I mean, it could go,
Right.
get unwieldy maybe, but, I think it's good to have this as a goal, because we need to develop it and figure out how does this advisory committee really.
Right.
Help LCS succeed. Even like things around fundraising and any other goals that we have. So, it's great to see it's finally
It's
moving.
coming, it's coming.
I'm gonna just toss that good neighbor meeting thing on the goal list, that does seem like a smart, addition to the list of things that I'd like to see happen in the next 6 to 12 months. Are there other thoughts? Well, this is not like, locked in stone, so
Good job.
I just wanted us to, John, you got something?
A quick question, and this relates to, the place for everyone, certainly. And maybe the role, one of the roles of Orange Community Shelter plays in that. Where are we at with daily navigation? The development, we talked a lot, and I know not necessarily in these meetings so much, but we talked a lot about, the need for a centralized place for, for daily navigation. And I think where we pretty much left it is what made the most sense would Lawrence Community Shelter would, at the very least, probably be the primary spot for that. Maybe not the only spot, but would be the primary spot for that. But have we had an opportunity to think about that, wrestle with that, figure out how that, might look down the road? Because that is going to be an essential component to the success of a place for everyone, at some point in time. So just any thoughts you have?
About daily navigation.
Well,
Like, could somebody just show up there and say,
Okay.
yes.
What's the plan?
So I propose spending of opioid funds that we have for the homeless resource center, Brett's Center. And that would allow him to be open, go from being open 6 hours a week, I think, to 60. And so he would be open the hours that LCS is essentially closed. And I think that's a good idea right now. It'd be easier to bring all the partners there and have all the resources there. But I do think, while that's happening, because that can happen, I think, kind of quickly, he's working on an SUP to expand space. But then, getting programming set up at the shelter too, to where people don't have to leave during the day and they can have resources there during the day too. But I think, there's still some work that needs to be done with staffing and other things, before that's really another hub.
So really what you're saying, well, by the way, for what it's worth, I like that idea a lot better than the other one I always had. Okay, but I wasn't supremely confident that we were gonna be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate, you know, hearing that, but that leads me to think is we've almost reversed what we were thinking before.
Yeah, we didn't think we had an option.
Yeah, what we thought before might make the most sense.
Yeah, Brett's been a game changer.
Yeah.
I think that the trajectory of the HRC is like, it's a game changer.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, off your plate for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I've actually, it's always on my plate. We were talking with our case managers, we're gonna have a presence. And I think I've talked to you about presence at Jubilee, presence at Dare, and our mid-reach case managers are gonna be down at the Dare Center at least once a week.
Well, my door is always unlocked.
I know.
Okay.
And, we'll include you on our list too. Maybe Friday mornings at breakfast, that'd be a good time to.
You don't even have to give me notice.
I think that's better than expecting you all to be the navigation space. Have the staff come to where folks already are. That's the model that we wanna see. That makes the most sense.
Because we shouldn't have people come where we want them, we should go where they want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and to that end, and I've been pretty vocal about this at times, is that there are actually two places primarily that people are. Okay, you got 125 or what, whatever the number is that are there, and then, at least 2 days a week, I've got 120, and they're not the same 120.
Right.
For the most part, so. That centralized location for daily navigation, I've always thought made an incredible amount, and without having the need or the expectation that somehow these 120 folks are gonna make their way all the way out to Lawrence Community Shelter to have this meeting or have that meeting or get a cup of coffee, for that matter. So, while the model suggests a one, right, I've never believed that our situation was going to be best served by district.
Right.
But aspirationally, I think initially we had that there would be 3 in the community, but then we just kind of got real.
Yeah.
Cause the health department, if we use the smart format, you need to, like, is it achievable, realistic? Is it achievable, realistic? We're like, nope, let's just go with 1. And if we get 2, we'll be good.
So I know that we're at goals, and we're not quite there at strategies, but I would like to talk a little bit about the grants part of our goals. Do we have a strategy where we have a grants manager? Like, how do we know that some of these fundings and grants are becoming available until we can apply them? I know that HUD maybe there's a way, we've got a Shannon here, right? For HUD, for funding, applications, open applications. But how will we know about grants and those things that are available that we can apply for, and then who applies for them? Do we have somebody who works in grant management within the agency now?
That's a great question, because it's actually more than that. It's like, I think Misty called me one day and said something about a fund, and I said, it was probably not a good day. And I said, no, we're not doing that. We can't do that. I said, no, Misty, no. But the thing is, that has to be planned. We can apply for all the grants we want. And as somebody who managed grants for a while, I always got applications that you could tell that it was just an ask. But the work behind to develop a program wasn't there.
Yeah.
People wanted the money, but what they wanted to do didn't flesh out. It didn't make a lot of sense. So we have to spend time identifying how we utilize the funding we're seeking. It has to be just as important once we get to have the plan in place to use the money that we're applying for. And so I think we can do that, but it has to be initiative based. What do we wanna do and how we're gonna fund it? We figure out what we wanna do and then find the funds to do that. But if we're just looking for funds, it causes programs to not be good at any one thing, because now this program has to change, because now they have this money, they have to do this thing.
Right, and have to
It
big
takes-
stipulations for the
right,
grants
and so
requirements.
We didn't
right,
really think this through,
Right,
how are we gonna do
Yeah.
that? So I think
Monarch
we need
Village
to
is
take
a
it
classic
through.
example of that.
Excuse me?
Monarch Village is the best example of that.
It's a
It, like,
resource, it's a great resource, but
it was fundraised to be for families,
yeah.
but it was not good intent, but it was not a good fit for families. So like, I think I'm backing up what you're saying, but I'm not, and, but I think we've already talked, but you still need somebody to write the grant.
Right, there you go.
And that's something that it's hard for even the city and the county. So I think we're trying to explore some resources that we can come up with, some resources that are available to all of our partners.
This
that
talking
advance
about
our
that. We-
plan.
We've talked about a grant writer and how do we do that? But I think once we sit down and we have a list of initiatives that we want to do, and we have plans about how they would work, just like we just talked about a family shelter, which I talked about project-based rapid housing. I think that if we sat down and figure out how we can incorporate that model into something, we can get the funding for that. Because I think that's a one way, we don't have to build a new shelter or have a space if we do it that way. That's one of the things that always made more sense to me. Why not house people in the same situation they'll be living in?
Yep.
What better way to model success, right?
Shannon's trying to say something.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna concur about let's don't chase grants to get money. Because I mean, and particularly HUD grants. I mean, the reporting requirements, the systems that you have to learn to work, and like for the housing authority, HUD is changing all their systems. I mean, it can be onerous to comply. And so I think I agree with James's model, because I think you end up with mission creep and the flavor of the day or whatever when you chase a grant. It's not part of your core mission, but then you have all these reporting requirements. But in half the time, people aren't tracking what you then are supposed to report. I think Jill will back me up. We had a situation where another agency in town had a COC grant. It was a disaster. The housing authority kind of stepped in, and the county and the city kind of stepped in to save those families and their housing. I mean, it's no small feat. So before we would just take on a grant, we got to make sure, yes, this is our core mission. Yes, we have somebody who can do the reporting requirements, and that we're not going to try to, put the genie back in the bottle after we've already taken the money and then we didn't do what we said we were going to do, or we can't report what they're requiring us to report, because that's a surefire way to get us in trouble. And to end up then having programs that you can't sustain because they won't renew your funding.
Thanks, Shannon. Well, it's almost 7:30, so. I don't think we have to have this all, beautifully packaged, but I appreciate the discussion. I think
It's good.
it's helped us think through like what our goals should be. We probably need to share it with our board members that aren't here, and then have some more discussion about it. But I think my hope was we could get to kind of a shared understanding of what we think our priorities are in the next, in the short term. And then kind of make sure you're feeling like it's clear to you what's being expected, to take that direction from us. So maybe we can work on like wordsmithing it so it feels clear and communicate that to the rest of the board. I'm gonna be out of town for our regular meeting, but that's 2 weeks from now, so kind of hope we can throw it on that agenda. I know we're also gonna probably have a presentation by Lacey about the donor engagement that she's working on right now. So maybe the goal discussion could be pretty quick and easy, because it's, most of us are here tonight, so. And then majority of the discussion probably about the donations. She's got some reports she's gonna preview to the exec committee on Monday. And then hopefully that'll, do it up for a really good dialogue for the board. Well, Thursday, or the Thursday after that. Of the week after that. I don't know if there's any other goals, thoughts? Otherwise, I think we're.
You guys are doing wonderful and I really appreciate it. All of you, the board, James, and look at where you guys are.
Yeah, thanks for saying yes. I think I
Good.
said that to John and Christina a lot, like, "Ooh, thanks for, and
Good.
Shannon.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth and Rebecca, thanks for saying, and Charlie, you're just sticking around, like, thanks for saying yes. It's been really hard. Y'all have done really hard stuff.
It's so pretty now. It started just so ugly. It's kind of ugly.
Ooh.
All right,
Saving lives.
any other business? Then I would, take a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Did I get a first?
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
I was,
Good idea.
And invite a
For that I
motion.
say, yes, you can get a motion.
And a motion's been made. and
And I
seconded.
believe we have a second.
All right,
We do.
see, there's no discussion, is all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes, we're adjourned at 7:23 PM. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Next.